The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. It is Current Events Wednesday, and our guest today is Jason Jones. He's a Catholic husband, father, film producer on movies such as Bella and The Stoning of Soraya M., also co-author of the book The Race to Save Our Century with John Zmirak, as well as frequent contributor to the stream.org, and he's an activist, human rights worker, and the host of the podcast, The Jason Jones Show. You can find out more about his good work at movieToMovement.com and the Vulnerable People Project at thegreatcampaign.org. Jason Scott Jones coming to us from Texas, I believe. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
I'm good, brother. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. And in just a moment, we're going to get into Jason's terrific recent article at stream.org, Tucker Carlson and the Girardian Way Forward, and much more today, including an update on the upcoming CCP Genocide Olympics, a term which Jason himself coined, and as well as talking about the genocide of the Uyghurs in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, as well as insights from Jason gleaned from his good work in Afghanistan. So a lot to get to, but first, it's important that we always begin the Current Events Wednesday show with this open. And I know maybe if you listen to this show every Wednesday and you hear this open, and it's basically the same open every single time, there's a reason for it. We've got to break through our desensitization. We've got to keep this top of mind. And so here we go. We want to remember that the biggest current event of all, and the number one news story that ought to be reported by all the networks, is going unreported today and every day, and that is the ongoing daily government-sanctioned, government-funded, government-protected mass murder of innocent children in the wombs of their mothers. These are real people being murdered by the thousands today and every day in our nation, which also means the mass exploitation of pregnant moms in need for profit by the lie of abortion. In terms of loss of human life, we have at least a 9/11 every day in the U.S. Imagine 3,000 of any other category of persons being murdered in a given day in our nation, and it going unreported by the media and even mostly ignored by the churches. And then imagine if that were happening every day, and you begin to understand something of the insane reality in which we find ourselves. According to a July 2020 article in the prestigious peer-reviewed medical journal The Lancet, we have a global death toll from abortion of more than 200,000 preborn children being murdered worldwide every single day. It is essential that we put great effort into breaking through our own desensitization to this massive evil. We've got to face reality on this and so much more. We must live, proclaim, and push forward the vision that every innocent human being, without exception, has a right to life. Even an atheist still ought to have the basic moral sense to see the evil in killing an innocent child. For those who believe in Jesus and His Catholic Church, we have the additional benefit of crystal clear, authoritative magisterial teaching on this, which truly gives us absolutely no place to hide in treating those in the womb as any less valuable than us. Catechism of the Catholic Church 2270, human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception, fertilization. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every innocent human being to life. End of quote. Also, if you've experienced abortion in some way as a mother, father, sibling, grandparent, etc., there are some great people, great resources available to help you in your healing process. We love you. You are not alone. You can go to lovewillendchildkilling.com, click on the healing tab for a bunch more information there. But Jason, before we get into the main content of your recent article at stream.org, Tucker Carlson and the Girardian Way Forward, I want to go to the heart of that article and apply it to that open that I just laid out. You write about a temptation to recognize the violence against one's neighbor, violence that demands that we submit to its lies, that there's this temptation to recognize this violence, that it will pass us over if only we will submit, if only we will go along with the lies ourselves. Speak to that temptation of going along with the lies surrounding abortion in our time and ignoring the reality of the ongoing daily mass murder of the preborn. How do we live not by lies in this area?
Well, first of all, Jim, I want to thank you for that open, because as someone who's life movement, and I apologize, guys, I'm a little sick. So if I look sick, I am sick. If I sound sick, but I want to thank you for that open, because as somebody who, I've been in the pro-life movement now since I was 17, all day, every day. And I think especially for those of us in the pro-life movement, maybe we can become even more desensitized because we're actually thoughtful of it. Most people are just evading the reality of abortion. They're not thoughtful of it. So, but those of us who are thoughtful of it, I think, lack a sense of urgency. We become strangely comfortable with it. Even those of us who are working in this movement. So, thank you for that open. It was really moving. It really moved me with that. This temptation, and then my article on Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz. Solzhenitsyn said, the violence will not most likely won't come to you. It's not going to come to you daily, right? But daily it requires us to lie and to live by lies. And the most important thing we can do to stand in solidarity with the vulnerable is just not perpetuate those lies. 2 days ago, one of the owners, an NBA owner, looked a camera in the eye as I'm looking my camera in the eye and said, I don't care about the Uyghur. It never rises above my line of concern. What was really horrifying about what he said was not that it was thoughtless, but that it was very clear that those comments were well thought out. And he was speaking for an audience. And that audience, as an investment banker and an owner of an NBA team, was Xi and the CCP. It was the Communist Party of China. And he wanted them to know that he was willing to lie on their behalf. And it was really horrific. But by God's grace, that became, I always say, their stumbling blocks become our stepping stones. So, we'll stand on their stumbling blocks and we'll amplify our message even louder and further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Since you bring it up, let's go there first. We'll come back to the article maybe in the next segment, but let's go right there because we do have this clip available. This is, again, one of the owners of the Golden State Warriors saying that he doesn't care about the Uyghurs. It's clip 2. Let's hear what he says and then talk about it from there. Here it is.
Nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think that's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard...
Wait, you're saying you personally don't care?
I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line. Okay? Of all the things that I care about, it is below my line.
Disappointing.
All right, I guess if there's anything that we can appreciate from that is that at least he is being honest. And he goes on, I watched the entire podcast with those guys, almost the entire podcast, certainly every part where they're talking about that issue, which went on for quite a while. And he continues to go on in the conversation and just saying, look, I'm just trying to be honest that this is not a priority for me. This is so far down the list, I just don't really care. And let's just follow up with another quick clip, which I think really sums it up, where he's coming from. And if we're honest with ourselves, this is the temptation that we're talking about. We would all be coming from this place of selfishness, if not by God's grace, if not for trying to do what we can to awaken ourselves to the plight of our neighbor around us. But here is where he really sums it up and encapsulates it just a little bit further on. Clip number 3, here it is.
It's an important discussion because if we don't stand for human rights and basic human rights, what do we stand for? And I agree that domestic is important.
I stand for me.
Yeah, we know that. All
right, so there it is. There's where he's coming from. I stand for me. Jason, can you speak to that for us?
Yeah, that's true. When he said he doesn't think about the Uyghur, that's a lie. If you're an NBA owner, you think about the Uyghur quite a bit. You think about the CCP quite a bit because your business interests are intertwined in this genocide, and I'm sure it's a big headache for them. I'm sure they have Zoom meetings on how to handle the subject. But when he said, I think about me, he made it very clear. He said, I'm interested in those issues. He laid out a litany of issues. And the litany of issues that he said he cares about were things that had to do with him or virtue signaling to interests that benefited him. And I have an article coming out this week at the Stream on the March for the Other. The March for Life is the only march in Washington, D.C. that takes place every year where no one marching at the March for Life is marching for themselves, right? Every other march in Washington, D.C., people are marching for their own interests, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? But the only march in Washington, D.C. that takes place every year where the marchers are there for someone other than themselves, the marchers are there for something other than their own interest, is the March for Life. And that's why we as the pro-life movement, pro-life Christians and Catholics, we have been the leaders in advocating for the Uyghur. We have been the leaders, and at the front of advocating for vulnerable ethnic and religious minorities in Afghanistan.
Yeah, when we get back, we're going to go further into this, as well as getting back to that topic with Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz. What is the Girardian way forward? Jason lays it all out in a recent article very, very well. Get into the CCP Genocide Olympics that are coming up. What's that all about? What does that mean to us? As well as, again, Jason's good work in Afghanistan and some updates on that. So a lot to get to today, but we're very, very blessed to have Jason Scott Jones with us, who's helping us to navigate all of this today. He's focused on this, on all of these issues all the time, and so it's really a great blessing to have him come in, help us to get more conscious of them and to get more active in doing what we can do to kind of step up for one another. So when we get back, we're going to have Jason with us and we're going to dive right in, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Prayer of Deliverance. Almighty God and Father, we beg Thee, through the intercession and help of the archangels, Saint Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel, for the deliverance of our brothers and sisters who are enslaved by the evil one, from anxiety, sadness, and obsessions.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From hatred, fornication, and envy.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From thoughts of jealousy, rage, and death.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every thought of suicide and abortion.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every form of sinful sexuality.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every division in our family and every harmful friendship.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
From every sort of spell, malefice, witchcraft, and every form of the occult.
We implore Thee, deliver us, O Lord.
Thou who said, Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, grant that through the intercession of the Virgin Mary, we may be liberated from every demonic influence and enjoy Thy peace always. In the name of Christ our Lord. Amen.
As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent from your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported. The Station of the Cross thanks our supporters who have enabled us to broadcast Catholic programs for more than 20 years. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel message and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments. Thank you for your continued support, and may God bless you and your family.
Do you love listening to the Station of the Cross on your car radio, but sometimes find yourself driving outside the listening area? Never miss another minute of your favorite show. Download the iCatholic Radio app so you can listen anywhere in the world 24 hours a day. The iCatholic Radio app is available for your phone in the Apple Store or for your Android phone in Google Play. Visit thestationofthecross.com for more information.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Current Events Wednesday is the theme today, and our guest is Jason Jones, Catholic husband, father, film producer, author, activist, human rights worker, host of the podcast, The Jason Jones Show. You can find more on his work at movieToMovement.com and the Vulnerable People Project at thegreatcampaign.org. Let's get to his recent article at stream.org, Tucker Carlson and the Girardian Way Forward. It begins by outlining what you say here, disturbing when Ted Cruz told the Senate last week, now a couple weeks ago, that the January 6th rally of 2021 was a violent terrorist attack on the Capitol. Cruz made waves when he said that. But you say here, after widespread backlash, Cruz did a follow-up interview with Tucker Carlson where he said something even more disturbing. He insisted he had only been referring to a limited number of rally attendees. We're going to break open why that's even more disturbing. But you lay it out that Tucker Carlson chose to be in solidarity with the powerless, while Cruz seems to have chosen a path of solidarity with the powerful. Let's listen to a segment from that interview to give people a taste of it. Then we'll come right back and get Jason's commentary on the other side. Here it is, clip 1.
And yet you called this a terror attack when by no definition was it a terror attack. That's a lie. You told that lie on purpose, and I'm wondering why you did.
Well, Tucker, thank you for having me on. When you aired your episode last night, I sent you a text shortly thereafter and said, listen, I'd like to go on because the way I phrased things yesterday, it was sloppy and it was frankly dumb. And
I don't buy that. Whoa. I don't buy that. Look, I've known you a long time, since before you went to the Senate. You were a Supreme Court contender. You take words as seriously as any man who's ever served in the Senate. And every word you repeated that phrase. I do not believe that you used that accidentally. I just don't.
So, Tucker, as a result of my sloppy phrasing, it's caused a lot of people to misunderstand what I meant. Let me tell you what I meant to say. What I was referring to are the limited number of people who engaged in violent attacks against police officers. Now, I think you and I both agree that if you assault a police officer, you should go to jail. That's who I was talking about. And the reason the phrasing was sloppy is I have talked dozens, if not hundreds of times. I've drawn a distinction. I wasn't saying that the thousands of peaceful protesters supporting Donald Trump are somehow terrorists. I wasn't saying the millions of patriots across the country supporting President Trump are terrorists. And that's what a lot of people have misunderstood that comment.
Wait a second, but hold on. What you just said doesn't make sense. So if somebody assaults a cop, he should be charged and go to jail. I couldn't agree more. We've said that for years. But that person's still not a terrorist. How many people have been charged with terrorism on January 6th? Like, why'd you use that word? You're playing into the other side's characterization that, as Joe Kent just explained, allows them to define an entire population as foreign combatants. And you know that. So why'd you do it?
All right, Jason Jones, what did we just see there?
I mean, I think that was one of the most powerful clips I've ever seen. You know, when I was watching that live, it was really unbelievable. The courage of Tucker Carlson, I think, admires Ted Cruz. He's a friend of Ted Cruz. I endorsed Ted Cruz for president in 2016. I was actually a national co-chair for Cruz for president. But, you know, what he did there was really unbelievable. And what Tucker did was he called a powerful senator who was standing with the narrative of the left. You know, he said, I don't believe you. And it wasn't true. I agree with Tucker Carlson. I don't believe Ted Cruz. You know, I think what he was doing is he got swept away in the moment with his colleagues in the Senate. And, you know, there's this irresistible urge. It's to stand with the powerful. And he mouthed the talking points of the left against. I was at the January 6th rally. I was a speaker. And of course, the stage was never set up on the Capitol grounds the way that it was supposed to be set up. And then so there were no speeches. We were where we were permitted to be. And now, of course, there were some violent criminals there. And they're violent criminals. They're not terrorists. And to paint everyone there as a terrorist. But, you know, most of the people that are sitting in jail cells or are looking at long prison sentences did nothing but, you know, they were in the midst of tens of thousands of people that were just moving, and they were in the middle of this crowd, and they walked up. I, by God's grace, witnessed the police open the gates, and everyone poured through. And I walked around because I don't like crowds, but I watched as the police dragged open the gates and people poured through. And that scene of people pouring through onto the Capitol grounds was shown over and over and over with like ominous music, as if these were these were hoodlums. These were people that were looking for the event where there were supposed to be speakers, and they watched the Capitol Police drag open the fences and then walked onto the grounds where there was supposed to be a stage and an event. And so for Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate to call everyone there terrorists was really unbelievable. But what was even worse to me was then to try to divide those of us who were there and didn't get swept away into the silliness, didn't walk into the Capitol, to try to divide us from those. Look, if a grandma walked up those steps and took a selfie and it's a misdemeanor trespass, it is what it is. Misdemeanor trespass is not a felony. I went to a lot of Antifa and BLM events. Whenever I was in Washington, D.C., I would sort of dress in dark clothes and just kind of go and walk in the midst of their insanity, especially in front of the White House. I just walked there and filmed it. I mean, that was chaos and violence, right? People were being beaten and murdered. Police officer was shot by Antifa. But to call a woman who does a misdemeanor, an elderly woman who does a misdemeanor trespass, to have the FBI blow open the door of her house and then to be dragged off to prison or just languish in a jail cell is really unbelievable. Then to have a conservative senator echo those charges of terrorism is beyond the pale. What we need to do as Catholics, it's easy for me to stand with the Uyghur. It's easy to stand and be pro-life. But, when Nick Sandmann was attacked by the mob, minute one, I tweeted out in support of him. When Kyle Rittenhouse was being attacked, immediately we came out in support of him. I was at the January 6th event. So obviously it takes courage for me to stand up for those who were there because I don't want to get swept away in any of this nonsense. But we have to be courageous and stand with the vulnerable. That's our line of gesture. And the reason I call it the Girardian way forward is Rene Girard said, mobs pick a victim. And that's what Cruz wanted. He wanted a victim that we could all agree was a bad guy. Those few bad actors, you blame them, and then we're all good with each other. But what we need to do is whenever we see someone unjustly being persecuted, we need to stand with them regardless of the personal cost to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you put it well in the article, how Girard taught that this path is a dead end, talking about what Cruz was seemingly doing there. And you say that he taught this path of radical solidarity with the powerless. Did you notice Ted Cruz, I think it was the next day or the next few days after, when he was before, I believe it was a Judiciary Senate committee, and he seemed to be going pretty hard in defense of those who were being held in solitary confinement, those who had been arrested and not been charged. And he seemed to be then saying, okay, I better stand up in this way. And he's also asking the question that later on in the interview with Tucker Carlson, he asks Senator Cruz pointedly, who is Ray Epps? They get into the whole thing about Ray Epps. And then Cruz, again, in that Senate committee, the Judiciary Committee, he's then asking FBI leaders, he's asking them who is Ray Epps, and he's trying to follow up on that, and he exposes them quite well in that time where they're saying we have no answer at this time, we're not going to say anything at this time. Now we've got Ray Epps coming back before the January 6th partisan committee that it is this Friday. Who knows what will come out of that? But these are questions that need to be asked, and it seemed like Tucker did light a fire under Ted Cruz in the days after. Did you notice any of that, and what were your thoughts?
I did. I want to commend Ted Cruz for that. That's how solidarity works. It took tremendous courage for Tucker. It's taken tremendous courage for Tucker Carlson to stand with the J6 defendants. Tremendous courage, right? Risking his career. He had his colleagues resigned because he did this. He had colleagues, that said it's Tucker or us, and they ended up walking from Fox. But why? Because Tucker stood with the J6 defendants. That takes tremendous courage. And that courage inspired and Ted Cruz courage, right? And that's how it works. I was interviewing on my podcast, The Jason Jones Show, John Andrazik from Five for Fighting, a big music star, and we were talking about cancel culture, and John Andrazik said, there's more of us than them, and I said, not only that, John, but most of them are us. They're just afraid of being eaten by the alligator. They want to be eaten last, so they side with the alligator. So what happens is when people stand with the vulnerable, it inspires others to stand with them. It takes the first couple of folks to stand with the vulnerable. It takes a lot of courage, but then increasingly it takes less courage. And then eventually it takes no courage, and that community is no longer vulnerable. What we're seeing with the January 6th defendants is that the narrative, Nancy Pelosi's narrative is falling apart. We have Ray Epps and all these other bad actors that are seen on film and video committing violent crimes and inciting others to violent crimes, and none of them have been charged. It's really unbelievable. But then you have, two friends who, were there with their wives and kids, who gave medical aid to somebody who was hurt, and they're looking at life in prison. This is really unbelievable. So, I commend Tucker and I commend Ted Cruz. Ted has demonstrated the ability to self-correct in the past. Several years ago, he had really made some inappropriate comments to a group of Iraqi and Syrian and Lebanese Christians. And there was a big reaction to his comments. And Ted Cruz corrected, apologized, learned the subject, and then became really the greatest advocate for Christian minorities in the Middle East in the Senate. So this is something that I do want to commend Ted for. But again, and Tucker Carlson was a good friend. It takes a good friend to correct you, and it may be even a better friend to correct you on his primetime national television show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking with Jason Jones. He is an activist, human rights worker, thegreatcampaign.org. Jason, also in this article, I just want to read this portion when you're talking about Cruz seeming to have chosen a path of solidarity with the powerful, with the deep state and the thoughtless mobs they manage to mobilize against powerless scapegoats. You go on to say it's understandable that Cruz or any one of us would be tempted to take that path. It means insulating ourselves from the pain and suffering of our unfortunate neighbors by making peace with the powers and principalities that threaten us all. I couldn't help but think of a recent example that I noticed. I don't normally watch 60 Minutes, but I saw that they were doing a story on an update to the Anne Frank story, a new investigation on who might have turned in the Frank family. And what they ended up discovering was it seems like the evidence points to actually a Jewish man, a Jewish leader in that community who would have turned them in, not necessarily even having known the family, but just having the information of where various Jewish families were hiding. And he would have turned them all in to save his own skin, so his family wouldn't be sent off to a concentration camp. So when we get back on to ask Jason about this temptation that comes for all of us to compromise in these ways, to go along with lies, to do evil, when we can somehow save ourselves seemingly, when in fact we aren't saving ourselves at all ultimately, but we go for that false counterfeit. We're going to talk with Jason when we get back. Stay tuned.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
I'm a widower, parent of 3 almost adults, and listen to you guys around the clock. Father McTigg, Society of Jesus, he's wonderful. Mother Miriam, of course, the Divine Office, and many other great things that Station of the Cross does. So thanks very much for your great work.
I had a friend at work email me and tell me about the Station of the Cross a couple months after it started, and I was so excited. I tuned into it, and I found that I love the Catholic station.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112, then share your testimonial with us.
Husbands, have you ever worried about the risks to your wife's health from the birth control method she's using? Why not learn a natural method of family planning that is 99% effective in postponing pregnancy and causes no risks to your wife's health? Find all the information you need for natural family planning classes or the home study course from the Couple to Couple League website at www.ccli.org. or call 513-471-2000.
Jesus 911, now weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern.
My name is Jesse Romero. I'm a retired Los Angeles cop. I'm a Catholic lay evangelist. My show on spiritual warfare is called Jesus 911, where you got 3 retired LA cops, Ruben Nava, Eddie Chavez, talking about the Catholic faith and teaching you spiritual warfare, how to defend yourself against the devil, the world, and the flesh.
Catch the Soul Patrol, Jesus 911, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, on the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Jason Jones, on this Current Events Wednesday. Jason is a Catholic husband, father, film producer, co-author of the book The Race to Save Our Century with John Zmirak. He's also an activist, human rights worker, and host of the podcast, The Jason Jones Show. Find out more about his good work at movieToMovement.com, the Vulnerable People Project at thegreatcampaign.org. And in the previous segment, we're very much getting into his recent article at stream.org, Tucker Carlson and the Girardian Way Forward. Highly recommend you go and read through that. But just a quick follow-up on that before we go to our next topic. Jason, again, that idea that you put forth in this article, this temptation that any one of us would have to insulate ourselves from the pain and suffering of our unfortunate neighbors by making peace with the powers and principalities that threaten us all. Can you just speak to that a little bit and just help us to see it clearly so we can see such a temptation when it comes, and hopefully by God's grace we will not succumb to such temptations?
Yeah, all of us have had that temptation, those temptations. All of us have succumbed to those temptations. You know, St. Peter, when he was in the crowd, got swept away and denied Christ. So it's acceptable and understandable. And I'm glad you brought up that Anne Frank episode on 60 Minutes, because I watched it myself. And my next article an article I'm writing for the stream next week is on that, because, you know, we found out it was who turned Anne Frank in, and Anne Frank's family in, and many other families in. Not only were they Jewish, but they were a head of the Jewish council, or a leader in the Jewish council there in Belgium. So here's the thing. Hannah Arendt wrote about this in the 60s and was hated, was despised, was called a self-hating Jew, was called so many horrible names. And she said, no, listen, all I'm trying to say is that perverse regimes, people behave horribly when they're in a perverse regime. And Jews are no different. Jews are people. That was her point. We're people. And people get swept away and they look after their own self-interest. And she said, I'm not saying they're guilty, but what I'm saying is there is something between guilt and innocence. So, I feel like that Hannah Arendt was vindicated. But what was her whole point was that the Nazis denied our humanness. When she called the Holocaust a crime against humanity, people were upset with Hannah Arendt for that. She said, it's a crime against the Jews. Why would you call it a crime against humanity? And she said, well, because first and foremost, Jews are humans, something the Nazis denied. And again, this man who turned in Anne Frank, who had a wife and children and who was scared, was a human and was swept away. And this is why it's very important that we make sure that our political communities do not become perverse, where people are having to do that are swept away and have to do horrible things like this just to survive or escape violence. When we look at our great saints, I'm looking on my wall of Jerzy Popescu and St. Maximilian Kolbe. Why do we know the names Jerzy Popescu or Franz Jägerstadt or Maximilian Kolbe? Because they were the exception, not the rule. How many Catholics were swept away into silence or even cooperating in Vichy France, in Poland, in Germany? And again, as Hannah Arendt would say, we're not condemning them for this. We're saying there is something between guilt and responsibility. We think to the early church when the debate that went around, could people return to the church who had apostatized in the face of fear? And of course, the answer was yes, of course they can. So what we as Catholics really have to do, and this is why, Rene Girard was like, when I first read Rene Girard, it was very comforting for me, because I wondered why in all of my initiatives, it was really hard to garner popular or mainstream support, or to get influential bishops involved, or media personalities. And well, you learn, because of course it comes with great risk. And Rene Girard said, to be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to become as vulnerable as they are. And very few people are willing to become vulnerable in the service of the vulnerable. But there's really no other way to do that. So yeah, that 60-minute special was really something special. It's really important. I hope everyone watches it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really great stuff here with Jason Jones. As we get into talking about the Olympics coming up in China in early February, I believe February 4th through 20th, the Winter Games, which, Jason, you have coined the CCP Genocide Olympics a while back, seems to have caught on. But I want to, as we get into this, I want to take it back to something we were discussing in the first segment with that one of the owners of the Golden State Warriors. One of the reasons why he was saying, I don't care about the Uyghurs, was because if you listen on, he's basically denying, he's trying to minimize what's going on there. The one person on the podcast is trying to say, hey, this is on par with the Holocaust, what's going on here. This is a really big deal. This is a human rights atrocity. And they're questioning that. This owner from the Golden State Warriors, he's basically saying, is it really? And he's continuing to kind of question, how do we really know what's going on there? And he continues to go down that line. So can you first off just kind of educate the audience, for anybody who hasn't been paying attention, what is going on there? What's going on with the Uyghurs in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, and why is this a big deal? Why ought we call the Olympics the CCP Genocide Olympics?
Yeah, well, it was really something to watch him really kind of try to minimize or deny it. And, we used to say, why didn't the Germans do something? Or did they not know the Holocaust was happening? Maybe they didn't know. Now I'm starting to think they probably did not know. People compartmentalize. Here you have a billionaire owner of an NBA team who is surrounded by, I'm sure he has a large staff, assistants, and he owns an NBA team. The Uyghur issue and the NBA have been intertwined for years now. So, of course, he is well briefed on the issue of the Uyghur. He knows very well there's a genocide, but he doesn't want to recognize it or accept it. Most Americans do not know. There are 3 million Uyghur. They're an ethnic minority, predominantly Muslim. They were Nestorian Christians until the 14th century, and then the Turkic invasions happened. They became Muslim. And in 1949, Mao, after consolidating power, invaded Tibet, and then he invaded East Turkestan. It was brutal from the beginning, but in the past 5 years, they've really ramped it up, and they've began interning millions of Uyghur. In these internment camps, there's systematic rape, there's organ harvesting, there is murder, and these camps are very similar to the concentration camps across Europe prior to the Wannsee Conference. So there's a lot of death in these camps. They are not yet death camps, but as we saw in Nazi Germany, those concentration camps in short order became outright death camps. But I don't want to minimize the fact that there's a lot of death in these camps. There are a lot of murders. People have been separated from their families for years. You can be beaten and killed for just saying a prayer, for owning a Quran, to having a Quran in your house or a Bible in your house. And it's not just the ethnic Uyghurs in East Turkestan. Of course, Hong Kong is being smashed under the boot of the CCP. All the Han Chinese across China themselves are the first victim of the CCP. And in Catholics, in one province, the bishop, all of his priests and seminarians have been disappeared. We have Jimmy Lai, a very prominent Catholic business owner and advocate for human rights in Hong Kong, who's been brutalized by the CCP. And so, it's happening all across China. They're constantly harassing and threatening Taiwan. But in East Turkestan, it is really something unique. It is genocide. It is ethnic cleansing, and it is rising to the level of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've put out an open letter to corporations sponsoring the 2022 Genocide Olympics, saying, "Dear corporate America," and you go on to call them on to say, withdraw your sponsorship of the 2022 Olympics until this ends, until this genocide ends. The lives of millions are on the line. Do the right thing. What can we do? What can the regular person who's listening right now, what do we need to know about these upcoming Olympics, and what ought we to do?
Well, it is exciting, Jim. As you know, we coined this term Genocide Olympics over a year ago. And now to hear Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and all these big talk show hosts using the term Genocide Olympics, it's really picking up steam. Laura Ingraham this week launched her, she had the slogan, "Not 1 minute." And, you can go to ccpgenocideolympics.com and sign our pledge, not 1 minute, not one product. And if these Olympics happen, and I do not think they're going to happen, it is really irresponsible for us to send our athletes to China. There's new viruses spreading there. They're telling the athletes not to bring their cell phones or laptops because they will surveil you to blackmail you. Why would we send our athletes to that country? I don't think these Olympics are going to happen. But if they do, I believe they will be the last Olympics. They will be the last Olympics because this is going to be so damaging to the brand of the Olympics. It's going to be catastrophic. So sign the pledge. Don't watch 1 minute of these Olympic Games. And don't buy one product from any company that sponsors these Genocide Olympics. It is really horrific. We've been full of it as a people. Jim, we've been saying never again since the day I was born. I've been hearing, in school, we'd always hear this never again, solidarity, and we just turn our back on every vulnerable community. But if we cannot stand with the people of China, the people of Taiwan, the people of Hong Kong, the Uyghur and Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, as they're being menaced by this tyrannical regime, it's really shameful. It is really shameful. And, I remember in the 80s and 90s in school, and, in high school and junior high, in the 70s and 80s, and in college, our professors condemning our grandparents' generation. Why didn't they do more for the Holocaust? They landed at Normandy. They didn't have Twitter. They didn't have Facebook. They didn't have Google. They didn't have cable news. They had a radio and a weekly newspaper. Like, that was it, right? They probably didn't know. They didn't have full awareness. We have 24-hour news stations. We have the internet. We have social media. We have no excuse. And this goes to Afghanistan as well. The Biden administration, their ham-fisted withdrawal from Afghanistan is led now to a great famine. And Afghanistan and our organization, the Vulnerable People Project, we've hired photographers to fan out all across the country in Afghanistan. And in the coming weeks, we're going to be filling, we've gotten them all Getter accounts, and we're going to be filling, social media with images of Biden's winter of no regrets, because people need to see what's happening and to understand that our foreign policy is responsible for this catastrophe in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to get into that in just a little bit, but first, Jason, in regard to what is taking place with this genocide of the Uyghur in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, with regard to that, any update on the response from any church leaders? Are you seeing any sort of response different than what you've seen? Is there anybody speaking out? What's going on? Has Pope Francis said anything to this point? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
No, Pope Francis has never uttered the word Uyghur. He's never uttered the word Uyghur. And it's really, it's scandalous. And it will be a scandal that echoes for generations. For generations, they're going to look back and people are going to ask, why was Pope Francis silent when the Catholic community in in Iraq and Syria was being wiped off the face of the earth by ISIS? Not a word, not a peep. He was silent. Why was the Pope silent for the Uyghur genocide? And it is really confounding. And the only thing that makes sense is that $2 billion a year cash transfer from the CCP to the Vatican.
Yeah, these are truths and facts that we must face, we must look at, and we must respond rightly. So we've got to understand what's going on. We are greatly blessed to have Jason Jones with us to help us to shine a light on the reality that is taking place. And we need to grapple with that in our own minds, in our own hearts. What does it mean, and how ought we respond? I think he's given us some great things so far to encourage us in the right direction here. But when we get back in the final segment, Jason is going to give us some important updates in his work in Afghanistan. What is going on over there? Very important. We need to know what's happening. We'll be right back with Jason Jones on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
If the cares and anxieties of life are weighing you down, come to the St. Thomas More House of Prayer and allow the Lord to refresh your soul. The St. Thomas More House of Prayer is a Catholic retreat center devoted to praying and promoting the Liturgy of the Hours. You'll find a tranquil atmosphere that's ideal for deep prayer, whether as an individual or for a group retreat. We're located at 365 Hill City Road in Cranberry, Pennsylvania. Make your reservation today or learn more at liturgyofthehours.org. You can also call us at 814-676-1910. That's 814-676-1910. We would love to help you experience the Liturgy of the Hours and discover the prayer that will change your life.
The iCatholic Radio mobile app is 2 apps in 1. Your place to hear great Catholic programs and music. Here's what listeners are saying about the updated iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Through the iCatholic Radio app, I have listened to the sermons and teachings several times. The effect has been a deeper understanding of my faith and Catholic tradition. This app has truly been a blessing in my life and has increased my faith.
With the new app, you can choose to listen to our programs like Mother Miriam Live or The Catholic Current whenever you like. But you can also switch over to the best in contemporary music by Catholic artists. We even bring you hours of Gregorian chant every Sunday morning. If you do not currently have our app, download it to your iPhone through the Apple Store or to your Android phone by going to Google Play and searching iCatholic Radio. The updated iCatholic Radio mobile app, your one-stop for great Catholic programs and music.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Jason Jones, movieToMovement.com, thegreatcampaign.org. Let's get into what's going on in Afghanistan, Jason's good work in Afghanistan, and let's get into it this way. We'll play a quick clip. This was after Joe Biden's botched Afghanistan withdrawal, a horrific debacle in so many ways. This was, let's just reset it, President Biden in an interview with George Stephanopoulos trying to do some damage control, seemed to just put forth more lies, and this was some of what came out of that. To just refresh our memories, here it is.
All troops are supposed to be out by August 31st. Even if Americans and our Afghan allies are still trying to get out, they're going to leave?
We're going to do everything in our power to get all Americans out and our allies out.
Does that mean troops will stay beyond August 31st if necessary?
It depends on where we are and whether we can ramp these numbers up to 5,000 to 7,000 a day coming out. If that's the case, they'll all be out.
Because we've got like 10,000 to 15,000 Americans in the country right now, right? And are you committed to making sure that the troops stay until every American who wants to be out is out?
Yes.
How about our Afghan allies? Does the commitment hold for them as well?
The commitment holds to get everyone out that, in fact, we can get out and everyone that should come out. And that's the objective. That's what we're doing now. That's the path we're on, and I think we'll get there.
So Americans should understand that troops might have to be there beyond August 31st.
No, Americans should understand that we're going to try to get it done before August 31st.
But if we don't, the troops will stay.
If we don't, we'll determine at the time who's left.
And
if there are American forces, if there's American citizens left, we're going to stay till we get them all out.
All right, Jason Jones, you've been doing great work in what's been taking place in Afghanistan. What stirs in you as you remember back what was happening back then and everything that has transpired since?
Yeah, well, President Biden lied there. There are Americans still in Afghanistan right now. We rescued an American. We were able to get an American home in December. There are still Americans there. And as far as SIV, special immigration visa holders, those others he was talking about, I mean, there's tens of thousands of people there. So it's really unbelievable what happened. But he lied. Look, they lied every single step of the way. They in August of in July 6th, President Biden went on the news and he said, look, we're not going to see like Vietnam. We're not going to have helicopters on the roofs. Afghanistan is not going to fall. When President Biden said this, and what the media should have told the American people, what the American people didn't know unless they listened to Jason Jones' show, by July 6th, 85% of the districts in Afghanistan had already fallen to the Taliban. So when he made those comments, it was already happening. The majority of the districts had already fallen to the Taliban. When they did a drone strike in retaliation for the Abbey bombing, they said that they didn't know it was a righteous strike. Within 24 hours, Milley came out and said it was a righteous strike. Well, they lied. He was lying because they knew within hours that they killed a family. Not only a family, an SIV family, a family that was qualified to be brought out and brought to the United States. We drone striked and killed. So they have been lying every single step of the way. This is not only the greatest shame in American history, it is one of the greatest debacles in the history of the world. The Biden administration left $85 billion of the most sophisticated weaponry in the world, and it left it into the hands of the Taliban. When Obama did something similar in Iraq, several billion, maybe $3 billion, I think, $3 billion of weapons fell into the hands of ISIS. Well, that's nothing compared to what Biden did in Afghanistan. And those weapons will come back to haunt us. Those weapons will come back to haunt us. And something that's really upsetting to me is so many of the people that should have been brought out were left behind. And so many of our enemies made it onto flights from Afghanistan into the United States. So there are reports of Taliban, Haqqani Network, and Al-Qaeda, and I'm sure ISIS-K too, that were on those planes that went from Afghanistan to the United States because the Biden administration was just shoving people onto planes. Meanwhile, American citizens were left behind. It's really disgraceful. And I think that the Republicans, when they're going to sweep the House, and when in 2024, Biden's not going to be able to run for re-election because the American people were deeply impacted by this. When I was in Iraq following the Peshmerga and their battle against ISIS, I had apologized to a group of Iraqi human rights leaders and religious leaders for our government's the American people failing them. And an imam stood up and he was very angry and he yelled at me. And he said, "Don't you ever apologize for the American people. The American people are not responsible for this. It's your government. The American people are a beautiful people." And that's really true. And everywhere I go, and as we've been working very hard, just this week, we delivered to over 1,000 families, 4 months in food and coal just this week. And we've begun evacuating people again from Afghanistan into Pakistan. And everywhere I go, traveling the country to talk about this topic, people come up to me, little old ladies, teenagers, everyone in between. And this really jarred the American people. I think when we look back at this winter, when people start seeing images of what's happening in Afghanistan, it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is disgraceful, very disturbing. We appreciate you helping us to stay up to date on this. And, I was going to refresh some of what you talked about. I was going to play a clip of Rand Paul questioning Secretary Blinken about who was killed in that drone strike in Afghanistan. That is one area that it is important for us to remember. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, well, and they lied in the committee hearings because when Blinken was asked, "When did you know that you killed civilians?" he said, "Within 4 hours." He said, "Well, when did you know that the primary target was a mistake. He said sometime later. And they didn't press him on that. They let that go. Sometime later could be 1 second, it could be 3 hours. But 24 hours later, after the attack, they went on national television, looked cameras in the eye, said it was a righteous strike. That was a lie. When they made those statements, they were lying. They knew that they had killed innocent people. It's really unbelievable. It is really unbelievable. The sins of omission and commission, and then for Biden to say he has no regrets. No regrets? Really? Because was it 13 service members died when the bomb went off at Abbey Gate? Really? No regrets?
Right. And that's important to remember that timeline, because after the Kabul airport was bombed and those service members were killed, many more wounded, as well as upwards of 100, I think, Afghans that were also at least wounded, many killed. That they don't get much press on that end. Mm-hmm.
I hadn't slept in days that night. I had taken NyQuil because I knew I needed to go to sleep because I was exhausted. But as soon as I took the NyQuil, I had this sense of dread that I can't sleep tonight. I have to stay up. And so I just sat my upstairs living room with my laptop, just trying to keep myself awake. And then I got a phone call that there was a warning that there would be a terrorist strike. You'd move everyone from Abbey Gate. So I was able to get some of our people away from Abbey Gate. And if I would have gone to sleep, they would have probably died. And so it's really personal to me, and to see that those people that are there to represent us and our government and our interests around the world are thoughtless to the damage that they've caused.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and they have no remorse.
Jason Jones, great blessing to have you with us and to hear some of the reports on the good work that you are doing. I just want to encourage everybody to go to thegreatcampaign.org, support Jason's good work any way you can. Also, movietomovement.com. Great work, brother. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, guys. God bless.
All right, God bless you. And if you have any comment on this show for me, feel free to reach out, Jim H. at thestationofthecross.com. That's Jim H. at thestationofthecross.com. God bless you.